Hey everybody, Dave here. As you know, we've been fortunate to have built a pretty influential audience over the years. Security leaders across the globe trust us and depend on us every day to deliver the news and analysis they need to do their jobs. And that's also why so many top security companies and hot startups trust us to connect them to the decision makers and influencers to help get the word out about their brand and fill their sales funnels. We've got lots of great sponsorship opportunities that can help you get the word out too. Just visit the cyberwire.com/sponsorship to learn more and connect with us. That's the cyberwire.com/sponsorship. Thanks. Foreign intelligence services attribute a recent cyber attack on an Iranian port to Israeli operators. EasyJet discloses a breach of passenger information. Verizon's annual data breach report is out, and it finds more errors than it does exploits. A look at the dark web during the pandemic. U.S. authorities warn local law enforcement to watch out for misinformation-driven telecom vandalism. Ben Yelin explains why the ACLU is suing Baltimore over a surveillance plane. Our guest is Robb Reck from Ping Identity on a recent CISO Advisory Council meeting regarding the sudden shift to working from home. And REvil is still offering celebrity dirt for sale, if they've actually got any. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, securing modern business with network detection and response. Security and IT teams are under more pressure than ever. Any workforce that can go remote has done so almost overnight. That means more stress on critical systems, more potentially unsecured IoT devices on corporate networks, and an urgent need to see and respond to threats as quickly as possible. ExtraHop helps organizations like Wizards of the Coast detect threats up to 95% faster and respond 60% more efficiently. As Chief Architect and Information Security Officer Dan McDaniel put it, quote, "There's no other company that aligns to supporting the DevOps model, the speed, and the lack of friction than ExtraHop." See how it works in the full product demo. Free online at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by McAfee, security built natively in the cloud for the cloud, to protect the latest like containers, to empower your changemakers like developers, and to enable business accelerators like your teams. Cloud security that accelerates business. It's about time. Go to McAfee.com/time. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020. Citing anonymous sources in a foreign government, the Washington Post reports that intelligence services have concluded that a recent cyber attack against the Iranian port of Shahid Rajeh was the work of Israeli operators, possibly in retaliation for earlier attacks against Israeli water treatment facilities. EasyJet has disclosed a data breach that affected some 9 million customers. The Guardian writes that the airline describes the incident as the work of highly sophisticated criminals. Verizon this morning released its annual data breach report. This year's version is twice the length of its predecessors, covering more regions and more economic sectors. As Reuters reads it, one of the principal conclusions is that financial gain significantly outpaces espionage as a motive for hacking. 86% of the breaches covered were committed for money, not intelligence. Industry Week's takeaway is the biggest problem is people, not systems. Our own pre-briefing call with Verizon led to that same conclusion. Exploits are rarely the way breaches are accomplished. The report concluded that error, such mistakes as incorrectly configured databases and misdelivered emails, are now about as big a problem as social engineering. There's another trend in attack technique. Web app attacks, the researchers conclude, have roughly doubled. Turning to the effects the COVID-19 pandemic is having on cybersecurity, France is proceeding with its centralized approach to COVID-19 contact tracing, ZDNet reports. Authorities maintain that this is being done with due regard for preserving users' privacy. The government is particularly interested in the utility the system, called Stop COVID, might have in containing a recurrence of the virus. Earlier this month, Medium offered a summary of the app's development, including its goals and prospects. Researchers at TrustWave's Spider Labs describe the various pandemic-related scams they're finding on the dark web and note some of the underworld reaction to them. They do note that the criminals follow the news, like everyone else, swap advice about staying healthy, express concerns about the consequences of the pandemic for their own enterprises, and so on. In short, an inverted version of the kind of chatter one sees in legitimate channels. But the more interesting material reveals the deliberations and plans that directly shape the criminal enterprises themselves. For example, there's chatter about demand for masks and whether that presents an opportunity for various forms of illicit trade. Masks and other medical supplies are being offered for sale in online markets that normally hawk contraband. Those same markets also offer patently bogus nostrums, most prominently COVID-19 vaccines, which of course don't exist. Accompanying the offers are an array of bogus stories alluding to widespread cover-ups and misinformation by various authorities. The underground markets are themselves feeling some of the pain legitimate markets are experiencing. They warn their customers that they may expect service disruptions, and they shed virtual crocodile tears over the health risks vulnerable customers faced during the pandemic. And some of the subsectors of the criminal-to-criminal market seem to be feeling considerable pain. Carding, in particular, appears to be experiencing a rough patch. Why this is happening is unclear and seems to call for explanation. Perhaps with a general slowing of economic activity, there's been a reduction in available inventory. And with the relative scarcity of new stolen numbers, carders are recycling their wares in the markets. Criminals who have access to new stolen cards are reserving them for their own use. Robb Reck is Chief Information Security Officer at Ping Identity. He shares insights from a recent ISSA CISO Advisory Council meeting regarding this sudden shift to working from home.
So generally, we have roughly 10 of our customer CISOs get together and talk about trends in the industry and kind of give some feedback to Ping on roadmap. We were intending to have our in-person meeting this year it was around the 20th of March. And you can imagine that didn't happen with COVID hitting. And we ended up having to shift to virtual about 2 weeks later. And we really used that shift to virtual as a chance to just get all of the team members of the council to talk about how has COVID and the rapid shift to work from home impacted them and impacted their companies and impacted their security departments.
Well, what can you share with us? What sort of insights did they have?
Yeah, so we got together April 2nd. It was 9 different folks from a variety of different industries. And I think the industries matter because, you have the really heavily impacted industries like healthcare providers. We had a cable internet provider there, an online learning provider, kind of strangely enough. And we had, less directly impacted manufacturing and financial services, but everyone had a kind of a unique perspective.
But what are some of the things that you were discussing when it comes to potential changes when we're through this, when we get through this together? Are they seeing that there are going to be some changes to the way they come at things?
Yeah, one of the interesting things that I learned out of this, everyone kind of across the board agreed we're moving so quickly that we're probably not making fully understood risk decisions here. The CISOs are trying to get in front of it, trying to understand what are the implications of every risk. But we're not able to go fast enough when you shift from one way of doing work to another, basically, at the drop of a hat. So one of my favorite recommendations I heard coming out of this is make sure that you're documenting each of the decisions you make as a part of this, and come back and just really consider, is it the right thing to do? If you now are allowing BYOD because you don't have enough laptops across your enterprise, okay, maybe that's the right thing, but maybe it's not. Or maybe you need to put some kind of new mitigation controls in place to allow you to do that BYOD.
What sort of things are you tracking in terms of the community response to this? How are these companies engaging with the broader community?
Yeah, I was really excited as we talked to the CISOs as a part of this council that a number of the companies that they work for have actually used this as an opportunity to give back and really not just go after the bottom line, but try and make things better. Top of the list, the workers' comp insurance company that was a part of our council, they worked overtime for the first few days of this to make sure that they were keyed in to be able to accept claims for COVID for workman's comp, which, not on the top of my list I'm thinking about, but they really were making sure their customers were able to react quickly and make sure their employees were getting paid in the middle of this. We talked already about the online school that's put a 24/7 war room on this to make sure it's running. Another one we had, though, is a scientific society that they're generally like a fee-based research organizations where you can get access if you pay for it. They made all of their resources, all of their research available to anyone who's working on COVID. So they just, threw that whole paywall out of the way and said, if you're doing this, we want to make sure we support you.
Yeah, it's really been heartening to see the good faith community response to all this.
And of course, we're continuing to see how things are going to change. And I expect, this is just chapter one of the new normal.
That's Robb Reck from Ping Identity. Robb is also the co-host of the Colorado Equals Security podcast, so if that is your neck of the woods, be sure to check it out. ABC News reports that the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the National Counterterrorism Center have issued an advisory to law enforcement authorities warning them to expect vandalism directed against 5G and other telecommunications infrastructure. Quote, violent extremists have drawn from misinformation campaigns online that claim wireless infrastructure is deleterious to human health and helps spread COVID-19, resulting in a global effort by like-minded individuals to share operational guidance and justification for conducting attacks against 5G infrastructure, some of which have already prompted arson and physical attacks against cell towers in several U.S. states. End quote. Such attacks, hitherto more commonly observed in Europe, have begun to appear in the U.S. as the bogus theory of a link between cellular networks and COVID-19 gained traction. Some of this vandalism predates the emergence of the COVID-19 virus and therefore also predates the misinformation that's now driving the incidents, Business Insider notes. Arson was reported at cellular infrastructure sites as early as December of 2019. And finally, Dark Owl researchers have been tracking the activities of the REvil gang that's claimed responsibility for hacking celebrity law firm Grubman, Shire, Macilas, and Sachs. The criminals say they've received offers for information they claim to have on President Trump and that their next offer is of data connected with Madonna. Bidding starts at $1 million. We are living in a material world. And now, a word from our sponsor, Thycotic. Thycotic protects companies from cyber attacks by developing innovative technologies that secure privileged accounts across the modern enterprise. Thycotic recently partnered with CyberWire to conduct a global survey of IT professionals, focusing on how organizations are implementing least privilege. Their new survey report shows overprivileged users are still a big challenge for IT professionals. The report reveals important insights for anyone planning or already down the path with their own least privilege security program. From the survey, they found that even though least privilege is a top or urgent priority, most organizations struggle with complexity and user complaints when implementing a least privilege security strategy. Go to thycotic.com/cyberwire to download the report now and get more details about the survey results, the key takeaways and recommendations for how to ensure success in your least privilege implementation. Again, that's thycotic.com/cyberwire to download this special report on the state of least privilege. And we thank Thycotic for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Ben Yelin. He's from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security, also my co-host over on the Caveat podcast. Ben, always great to have you back.
Great to be with you, Dave.
We are going to revisit a story that you and I have talked about on more than one occasion, and that is this plan to put some spy planes over our city of Baltimore, our beloved city of Baltimore, basically a DVR in the sky for surveillance. There's been a development here. The ACLU is taking issue with this plan.
Yes, they are. They're actually suing to try and stop that surveillance plane. And as of now, that plane is actually in the sky. I was reading commentary on some neighborhood Facebook pages saying that they've been hearing this bizarre humming sound. It kind of sounds like a blimp flying over a baseball stadium. Mm-hmm. And it turns out it is this surveillance plane. So it's been up in the air for about a week. It was sold to the city of Baltimore by a former Army individual, Mr. McNutt, who has his own surveillance technology. There have been a lot of legal policy challenges to this, but the airplane is finally airborne. And the ACLU is suing on a bunch of grounds. Obviously, they're worried about individuals' Fourth Amendment rights. When you have an airplane that can take millions of different pictures in real time of the city, that certainly almost by definition lead to unreasonable searches and seizures. The government did not get any sort of judicial authorization to take those pictures. And, because of the way the technology works, you can zoom in beyond a city block onto an individual home or an individual sidewalk and see an individual there. And then, there are a lot of potential First Amendment concerns here. We've talked about on this podcast and on our podcast how, the potential for racial bias creeps into all of these surveillance technologies. And it's notable from the ACLU's perspective that, the first one of these spy planes that's going up in the country is going up over a city that is 60% African American. And, even though it is a city that has suffered from a pretty serious crime spree over the past several years, I think that's certainly something worth noting. And, they've talked about how surveillance methods have been used for both religious or against religious and political groups. One of the ones they mention in this article is the Black Lives Matter group in Baltimore City. So, yeah, I think we're going to have to sit back and wait to see where this lawsuit goes. Litigation like this can take a long time. You're going to have dueling motions, a lot of different legal proceedings. I think we could be several years away from some sort of resolution on this issue. And meanwhile, unless the ACLU is able to obtain an injunction, which I think is unlikely, because a judge would have to find that this spy plane is irreparably harming the citizens of Baltimore, then, while this litigation continues, that plane is in the sky taking pictures. So smile, Baltimore. You are on camera.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here, because first of all, is it even fair to call it a spy plane? I mean, do we call security cameras that police put out, do we call them spy cameras?
Fair enough. Sure, one could, but yes, you're right. You're right.
Well, but also it makes me wonder, it is my understanding that when you are out and about in public, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy. How does that not apply here? Is it just the scale of it?
I think the scale is a huge part of it. So, that doctrine that you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy when you are in public view was created in an age of much less pervasive technology. It was really about what would the police spot, if they were to see you running on the street or running out of your house. That's the sort of the notion of the plain view doctrine. Does that doctrine and should that doctrine change when we're talking about a plane that can take millions of real-time photos and engage in 24-hour surveillance of people who are out in public? Is it still fair to have that same legal doctrine apply in this age of new technology? And I think the ACLU is going to argue, and they have some reasonable Supreme Court precedents at their side, that things are fundamentally different. We're going to have to adapt that plain view doctrine to deal with a technology like this, because the legal doctrine is outdated. And I think they're going to be justified in making that argument. But, I'm not sure which way federal judges will come down on that issue.
Do you suppose that it could be a situation here where the plane is allowed to stay in the air, but in order to use any of the information it gathers, you'll need a warrant?
So that's possible, unless the program is enjoined on one of those First Amendment issues, because you can burden people's constitutional rights even if there's no criminal proceeding. But yeah, I could certainly envision a circumstance where a potential crime is caught using this aerial surveillance technology, and a criminal suspect tries to suppress that evidence on Fourth Amendment or First Amendment claims. And then that's going to be litigated at an individual criminal proceeding. Maybe that, instead of this ACLU lawsuit, will be the vehicle where we get some clarity on the constitutionality of this surveillance. But, that's going to take time too, because we're going to have to wait to have an airtight case where we really did catch a person committing a crime. The only evidence that was used to arrest that person was aerial surveillance. And, once those circumstances present themselves, then we can go through that case. I think because the plane has just been launched, we don't have any criminal suspects who have standing to challenge it. So that's why we're seeing this civil suit from the ACLU.
Interesting. Well, in the meantime, I'm launching my line of umbrellas that from the sky look like other people.
There you go. See, you just have to fight fire with fire.
You have to look on the bright side of things, right?
Yes, exactly. And if you notice a lot of people in Baltimore City pointing their middle finger to the sky, you'll know exactly what that means now.
Right. It's a new citywide sign of solidarity.
Yep.
There you go. All right. Well, Ben Yelin, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. And for professionals and cybersecurity leaders who want to stay abreast of this rapidly evolving field, sign up for CyberWire Pro. It'll save you time and keep you informed. Listen for us on your Alexa smart speaker, too. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, a Proofpoint company and the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Elliot Peltzman, Haru Prakash, Stefan Vaziri, Kelsey Bond, Tim Nodar, Joe Kerrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yelin, Nick Valecki, Tina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow.